Well, let's move right to the questions now. Are any? Yes, some of you guys are as old as me. You remember President Reagan always used to call on Helen Thomas first at presidential press conferences? You remember that? Helen always had a red dress on. At meetings like this, it's expected to call on Alan Berger first. So Alan has his hand up, which he doesn't need to do. We're just going to move straight to calling on him first, even if his head has his hands down.
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed the session. Very good. I'm Alan Berger from the University of South Carolina. I'd like to make first two small corrections about Jens's paper, and then make a couple of general comments about John and Jens's paper. The two small corrections are, one was you showed a positive sign on the Z-score, which is an inverse measure of risk. So I don't know if that was...
it was an inverse Z-score, I should have said, Alan. It's an inverse Z-score. Yeah, thank you. You're quite right. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah.
And then also a correction is that Jens did show the returns that were actually lower for the bank. So I believe he did cover that in his presentation. Maybe it wasn't obvious from the paper. Now, my more general comments are: first of all, these two papers were really good. I really thought they were first rate. And you found exogenous events, and you found very convincing evidence that exogenous reductions in supervision do increase risk. But what I'd like you to do is take it one step further. Now, we know that optimal risk is not zero. Some people actually gain from the risk taking. So those that got those extra commercial real estate loans, they probably liked the outcome that they got more loans. And so what I'd like you to do is to go back. We have available to us county information on economic outcomes like unemployment and income and so forth. I'd like you to take the next step and see, did the community actually benefit or not benefit from this extra risk taking?
Well, why don't we answer the questions and respond one-on-one? So if you have any response, that'd be great. Any of you?
Sure. I'll as if by magic, it turned on. So yeah, thanks a lot for the comments. Actually, what we're doing right now is trying to go through some old volumes to look at actually commercial real estate markets, local commercial real estate markets. We do have these old county level outcomes at an annual frequency, which we include as controls, but we didn't think too much about using them as outcomes, but we certainly could. The federal S&Ls are relatively few in number relative to commercial banks at this time. But certainly in terms of residential real estate mortgage, they were a little more important, but they were still ramping up their extension of these commercial loans. So I don't know how much of an effect this additional risk taking would have had on the counties, but it's definitely something we could and should check. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, just to say thank you, Alan. I think it's a great idea to look at sort of county level outcomes. Because there are, winners and somewhat losers in this game. We looked very much at the supervisory perspective here only, but I think it's a very, very interesting angle that would very much complement what we do. Thank you.
All right, next question.
Yes, hello. Follow the rule, I will introduce myself. My name is seemingly. The pronunciation is close to seemingly, the English word, and. I used to be the emerging scholar last year, and this year I attended again from University of South Carolina. Alan is my advisor. And the suggestion follow both Alan and Bob DeYoung is like this. For the outcome variable, if you are interested, you can add as a bank liquidity creation. In banking theory, bank exists for two reasons. One, the transform risk, which is the input of the bank. The other one is a liquidity creation. We can measure it as the bank output. Empirical evidence already documented the bank liquidity creation is a better output method than the total bank asset. And also, from recent financial crises, we know the off-balance sheet liquidity creation contributed more than 50%. The data is available from Krista Bowman's website. And for the first paper, the data is like from 1981 to 1985. Krista's data starts at 1984, right, if I remember correctly. But the formula is available from Alan and Krista's 2009 RFS paper. you can build your data by yourself based on a formula. And okay, thanks.
Okay, questions as opposed to advice. If we have if we have detailed information to communicate to the authors, best to do that during the break. Okay, yes, sir.
My name is Dave Hanrahan. I'm president of Capital Bank of New Jersey, a commercial bank of about $500 million in size. My question's for Drs. KANDRAC and Hagendorff. In her opening remarks, Chair Yellen made reference to actions the federal agencies have taken to extend the examination cycle from 12 to 18 months for banks now up to $1 billion, which was greeted as welcome news by a bank that's $500 million. The conclusions you reached in your paper were that there was more risk from greater distances in geography. I'm curious what your hypothesis might be on greater distances in time between exams.
Sure. You want me to take that first? So I can speak to that a little bit. The reading some of the anecdotes from, if you'll recall, there was this regulatory blitz that happened 2 years after the move where they convened 11 of the other presidents of the FHLB districts, and they agreed to give 250 of their supervisors and examiners. And at this time, apparently a lot of the issues, so I showed that examinations per institution fell, but really these reportedly were just cursory sort of examinations, and many of the institutions hadn't had a thorough review in 2 or 3 years as a result of the move at the time of the arrival of these regulators. So, reportedly, this was this time gap was a big reason that a lot of these banks weren't supervised sufficiently, and why they took on a lot more of the risk. So again, we haven't looked at the differences by size. All of our institutions were very small, so I can't really speak as much to whether that would be more or less important for the large or smaller institutions.
One of the items that we do look at in our paper too, among the many things, was that we looked at whether an examination is taking place in a particular year. And if I remember correctly, we do find a small reduction in risk linked to that. So presumably, longer time between examinations might suggest, is my hypothesis, that a small increase in risk. But I'm pretty sure that once those changes have been enacted a few years down the line, there'll be quite a few papers, quite a few teams that will be looking at that, because it's an exogenous increase in the time of that examinations take place. So time will tell whether our hypothesis is correct there.
People meant for great natural experiments.
Indeed, yes.
Okay, on the aisle, gentleman in the red necktie. Yes. And then we'll move over here. Yes, your red necktie.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Dean Bass, Chairman, CEO of Spirit of Texas Bank. I represent the 70s and the 80s in Houston, Texas, and in surrounding areas. So I remember very well those days. Global, let me just say, global cash flow was not thought of, I don't think, for about 30 years. So let me just say, I can't speak against examinations because I'm here with the commission. I don't want to say that. And we always learn, and we really desire those exams. So check mark there. What I would like to say, at early signs of economic challenges and regulatory legislative changes, would you not expect, there's a question here, would you not expect the number of examiners and examinations to increase, to rush in to help stabilize and strengthen the changes to those examinations for the financial stability of the system? So would you not think those would follow an event? I would naturally think that, because living that, I saw that happen, and being an old examiner, we did that as well. So I think that might be a factor as always.
So you're saying you saw examiners come in when it was evident that there were too few?
Today, if we saw the signs, a storm's coming, we prepare best we can. It's going to hit us, and then we're going to, being from Houston, I understand this. and then we rush in as best we can to rescue who we can and stabilize and try to think better and then have more on the ground to assist us going forward. So we get a better grasp of the lay of the land and we improve and we learn from it, right? So I think some of the buildup that you saw after might have been not just because you had more lackadaisical before, it's because economics changed our philosophy and our thought, that changed and we brought in more help to initiate the stabilization of the system. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's a good thing, it's a fact.
Okay, from this side of the room, anything? I've been staring over here. Yes, sir.
The question for John Angelo again. So was the increase in risk-taking that you observed, was that confined to lending, credit risk? What about other risks?
Well, I can answer very briefly for my analysis. That's the only factors that we look at. Yes, so in that sense, yes, it's gone fine to that, but there may be other areas. Are there any in particular that you're thinking of?
Interest rate risk, for example.
Okay, yeah, understand. Yeah, there's others that we could look at too, of course. Yes.
Right. So for sometimes I want to fall back on our lack of rich data from this time period, but we don't look at any kind of duration gap or anything like this. We just don't have the data from the thrift financial reports at the time. Some of our series are discontinued and restarted. So we mostly focus on loans, but a couple people have suggested some other risk-taking measures that I think we actually do have some additional data for. For instance, we can look at loan loss provisions, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi there, Kurt Knudsen from Freedom Bank in Overland Park, Kansas. This is for Dr. KANDRAC too, and it's also from living during the time period of the savings and loan crisis. It seemed like, in hindsight, after looking at the savings and loan crisis, there was really a handful of players that were mainly responsible for the majority of the losses. Some of them were in Texas. And so my question is, did you look at the concentrations and how that played out regionally or by individual? Because I think there were a handful of maybe 10 people that were really responsible for a large portion of this. And then the second question to that is, if you looked at that, was the lack of this regulation or supervision in Texas a precursor to that, or did it lead to that in your mind, or
So yeah, we did look at outliers. Of course, at this time there were, for instance, Empire Bank in Mesquite, Texas, I think was one of the poster children of the SNLs that had their assets growing tenfold over the course of a year or two. So we
savings was kind of another one that was
right. So we did throw out these outliers based on rapid loan size. We see that some of this difference was evident in stock form versus mutual form thrifts. There are lots of stock form SNLs in the Texas district, and they seem to be the ones that kind of engaged in a lot of this risk taking. We show that our results hold, pretty much across the board. Whether we look, so for instance, one of the tests we did was just look at Arkansas and Missouri and compare those two states, and the banks there weren't as aggressive as the ones in Texas, but you still see quite a significant effect.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Cindy Corse from the San Francisco Fed. I'd like to thank the panel for the research and particularly Martin for some of your thought-provoking comments from the community banker perspective, which actually is the foundation for one of my questions for Jens. Mm-hmm. Martin, you mentioned that, quite rightly, that there's multiple layers of supervision, particularly for the state-chartered banks. And Jens, in your research, you had 10 office closures you looked at, 1 for the Fed, 4 for the FDIC. The institutions in those areas were subject to state supervision, and then 5 for the OCC, where you didn't have a complementary state supervisor. Did your research show any difference in the increased risk or the increased lending between those groups, the FDIC Fed banks and the OCC banks?
I must say I can't recall for lending. I know for risk taking the answer is definitely no. I'm not sure something we looked at, but something that I think we'll go back and look at. So if I understood the basis of your question right, it is because of having that complementary role between state and federal regulators. Did I understand that right?
Right. Typically, either they would be doing contemporaneous examinations with both state and federal regulators, or they would be doing alternate, but still the state would be a constant for those institutions.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that comment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tim?
Hello, Tim Yeager from University of Arkansas, and I have a question for Michelle, and want to forget about that paper as well. And first of all, I appreciated all the papers. I thought they were very good, very interesting. My question is, did you look at the quarterly data instead of annual data when you're looking at provisions and charge-offs? Because what I've noticed, especially during the crisis years, the Great Recession years, is that a lot of banks will almost charge off on a quarter-to-quarter basis, and if they have underestimated their potential losses on their loans, they catch up in the fourth quarter, so there's a lot of seasonality, right? And so you might be able to learn something if you haven't yet by looking at the quarterly trends and maybe looking at that fourth quarter and seeing how much of their charge-offs they're catching up there. That might give you a little more detailed or a little more micro-level view of the patterns that they're exhibiting.
Yeah, that would be interesting to look at that. I mean, one of the reasons we use the fourth quarter data is because of the adjustments that go on throughout the year. Sort of, you know, a lot of banks get religion in that fourth quarter, or religion is forced on them to kind of get rid of that. But that would be interesting to look at, to see if we see any sort of divergence there. It's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Next question. Yes, sir.
I'm Chris Moya, the Director of Financial Institutions Division from New Mexico. And I guess mine is more of a thought here, and maybe see what your hypothesis would be on this topic. But as regulators, as you start to evolve the examination process and go to more of an off-site examination, where we're utilizing technology, do you think there would be similar results with a less interactive examination as opposed to being in the bank? Would a culture start to evolve from that, perhaps similar to your studies here?
I think if everyone on the panel could give a shot at this, and maybe Marty, you could start.
So we've just completed a safety and soundness exam. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York offered to do the commercial credit file review remotely, and we could do that, but we would prefer to have them in the room with us so that we could talk through the issues and do it eyeball to eyeball, because once there's distance, that's not the way we do business, and it becomes harder to talk through the issues.
It'll be interesting to see going forward how much the distance matters with the increased use of off-site monitoring. With technology, you can virtually have examiners in the bank at all times looking at certain things. So, I mean, technology is definitely going to change things, and the idea of having physical examiners in the bank may not be as important if you had done this work now, as opposed if they had that model back then, you might have found the same results.
Yes, technology does change things, of course, but we know still from the lending literature that there's a lot of soft information that technology just can't codify and transmit. So the lending literature tells us that those benefits, the technology has diminished the benefits, but just a little bit. The benefits of proximity are still there. And one thing I would have always liked to do with the work that I've presented, but we in a way can't, because most of our closures are in the 2000s, so technology was pretty much then what it is today. But to go back to my first statement, I think technology will eat away at it a little bit, but I think soft information, as we know from lending, is still best transmitted in person.
I think the results from our paper would be inconclusive. There was this weird dual system at the time where the examiners who sat at the FHLBs but were FHLBB employees and pored over the financial statements, they were separated from the supervisors. This was system-wide, and it was part of the reason for the S&L crisis, reportedly. But it is the case for us that the examination staff recovered more quickly in the Dallas district than did these field examiners, than did the supervisory staff. And yet you still saw this increase in risk-taking until the regulatory blitz took place.
Christopher, thanks for that excellent question. And we'll end on that. The clock on the wall says 4:01, so we've fully exploited our time. I want to thank everyone in the audience for questions, and especially the 4 terrific presentations from the panel.
So again, I echo that. Great job, everyone. There are a few takeaways that I know I'm going to take back and mull over a little bit. Martin, this idea of regulation and minimizing uncertainty, maximizing predictability, I think we all need to think about that a lot. There's been a lot of uncertainty over the course of the last 10 years. How do we get to predictability and think of that as sort of a guiding principle? That's a great one. The other thing that I took away here is this, and I knew it, technology does not substitute for soft information. We actually get that. Absolutely, we'll be doing more work off-site because some bankers want it, but we will not let that subsume the fact that that contact remains important. So we have to be sure the pendulum doesn't swing too far. So thanks for reminding us of that. And Michelle, that we apparently, based on the analysis, do exercise judgment in the evaluation of bank accounting practices. I hope all the bankers in the room have a little hope that as we implement CECL, that will hold to that promise. So we will break now for 13 minutes. We lost 2 minutes, sorry, and reconvene for a presentation by our winning case study competition team. So please return and be in your seats by 4:15. Thank you.